Welcome back to Morning Joe. We've got more now from Wisconsin, set to hold its Democratic primary today after Governor Tony Evers lost a heated legal battle in two of the nation's top courts. Yesterday afternoon, Wisconsin's Supreme Court overturned Evers' executive order early Monday to postpone the election to June, citing public health risks due to coronavirus pandemic. That Supreme Court was not compelled, though. The decision preceded a ruling by the United States Supreme Court, which refused to extend the deadline for absentee voting in Wisconsin by 6 days. The 5-4 vote was split along ideological lines, with the court's conservative members in the majority. Joining us now, founder, executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, David Becker. And Jon Meacham is back with us as well. David, good morning to you. We're getting pictures already this morning out of the state of Wisconsin, voters standing, waiting in places like Waukesha to get into the polling place, shoulder to shoulder in some cases. What are your thoughts as you look at those images?
Well, it's a shameful occurrence that's happening in Wisconsin. Honestly, politics has trumped the safety of the voters and the interest of voters in expressing their voice in our democracy. And it's really unfortunate that we find ourselves in this position now. I think it's a real testament to the professionalism of the election officials at places like the Wisconsin Election Commission and all of the locals running elections there. They're doing the absolute best they can under a really unfortunate circumstance. And God bless all of those voters who are doing their best to try to both express their voice in our democracy and also protect their own health.
Yeah, the voters want to have their say. They say, all right, we're going to have the primary today. We're going to vote. But I imagine turnout is going to be way down because there are a lot of people who, frankly, don't want to go out and risk their own health. What would be, David, a better way to go about this today?
So for today, we're really in a triage mode. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. Wisconsin found themselves with a primary scheduled right at the height of the pandemic, and everyone's doing the best they can. I think a bigger question is, what are we going to do about November, where we cannot move the election? We should not move the election. And right now, election officials all over the country are planning how to run an election so that all voters can participate in safety. And one of the most important things here is voter choice, giving them options to vote in ways that they can feel safe. Voting by mail is going to be a big part of that, giving everyone the option to vote by mail. But also there's going to be a need for safe in-person voting options. There are lots of people who still prefer to vote by mail, where mail is not an easy way to reach them because they're younger or because they move a lot or they live in urban centers. There's going to be a big challenge there, but election officials are thinking about that. And I think election officials all over the country, whether both Democrats and Republicans, Republican Secretary Mac Warner in West Virginia is offering the easy opportunity to vote by mail for everyone there. Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia is doing the same there. There are secretaries of state all over the country, Democrats and Republicans, who are really thinking about this now, trying to prep for November.
You know, David, Oregon started vote by mail. The legislature approved it in 1981. I know a lot of local races by 1987, 1988 were using vote by mail. I remember 1996, a lot of Republicans worried about the Senate election being held by vote by mail because the attitude then as now was voting by mail actually gets more people out to vote and may disadvantage Republicans. What do you think about the president suggesting that if you vote by mail, it's easier to commit acts of fraud, despite the fact that 50 million Americans voted by mail in 2016?
Well, states that have had a lot of vote by mail will tell you that's not the case. They have systems in place to prevent fraud. There's a lot of checking of the ballots. Every single absentee ballot, when it comes in, is checked for signature matching, for other identifying characteristics to confirm that it was from the voter that it was supposed to be coming from. I don't think that's a big concern. We've seen a lot of an increase in the language to suggest that fraud is rampant, which of course is all part of the effort to delegitimize the outcome of elections. It's something we see foreign adversaries do as well. And of course, we know that fraud is very, very rare in the United States when it comes to voting, whether it's by mail or in person. The states that do vote by mail really well, they've been doing it for a long time, and they educated their voters over a long period of time to make sure they understood how to do it right. It's going to be harder to do in some other states, and we want to make sure that voters have a way of voting that they feel comfortable and confident about. And especially for particularly younger voters, students, voters who might move a lot, mail isn't always the best way to reach them. So we might have limited in-person options and much more vote by mail, which is a good thing, but we still need to give options to voters to make sure everyone who wants to vote can.
Mika?
What about the concern that some might have about November, the presidential election?
Well, it's a big concern. All I can tell you is that I talk to election officials all over the country, and they're thinking about that now, even if they have primaries coming up. They know that that election is not going to be moved. And one of the big concerns is not only getting people out to vote in a way that they feel safe, making sure they know about the options. Things are going to change for November. They're going to be different than what people have seen in past elections. A presidential election is a time where we see the largest number of infrequent voters showing up as well. These are voters who might not have a lot of information about how to vote or the process. And it's going to be particularly important to get really good information out to those folks. And then something, Joe, you brought up in the last hour that I think is really important. This is going to be used to further delegitimize the outcome of the election by the loser. And foreign adversaries are already doing that. And this is setting up a concern that anything like the coronavirus or any of the other concerns that have often been raised, like the myth of rampant voter fraud, could be used to delegitimize the outcome. And that's something election officials are also very concerned about.
And so, Jon Meacham, of course, as David said, this is, and as The Atlantic has written, this is happening elsewhere. Creeping authoritarianism has prevailed. The Atlantic writes of what's happening in Hungary with Orban, who used this coronavirus to grab even more power, basically power by decree. And, you know, I wrote a couple of months ago, forget the comparisons with fascism, forget the comparisons with Hitler, forget the comparisons with Mussolini. Look at what's happening in Hungary. Look at what's happening with Orban, a leader that, believe it or not, a lot of so-called conservatives still praise. And that's what a lot of people fear for the United States of America. And the president's already setting up the delegitimization of the fall election. I'm not saying he's doing this, but there are other people who are very concerned about some of those parallels.
Absolutely. And look, from Lexington and Concord to Selma, the right to vote has been at the heart of who we are and how we express that. And one of the things that I'd recommend to folks is, outside of taking care of your neighborhood insofar as you can safely, and the healthcare workers and taking care of your family, get online and study up on the kinds of issues Dave's talking about, because this is a useful use of your time right now to understand suffrage, to understand how states can make this work. Because we won the Second World War. We won the long twilight struggle of the Cold War. We can figure out how to vote between now and November. I'm just convinced of that. And it's going to require mail. And God, I'm interested in the Colorado example where it's like library book returns. You can drop it off. And there's not going to be one solution here, but there will be a couple. And the other thing to absolutely pay attention to is when you don't want more people voting, the question you need to ask is, why does that person say that? And that answer is really troubling.
Absolutely.
Donald Trump has said that already. He has said that if we voted by mail, Republicans would never win again. The Speaker of the House in the state of Georgia has said the same thing, that they don't want more voter participation. If you want to participate in the fall, ask for absentee ballots as soon as you can in your state. David Becker, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
My
you.
good friend David Stafford says hello. Jon Meacham, thank you as well. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.